it's like there was no thought in planning around this. And so when the Federal Reserve comes out and says, well, we'll help protect the assets of the rich people, that's all we can do. It really is a little sort of a let them eat cake moment for me. It feels a little tone deaf. But
there could come a time when the interbank lending freezes up, when the banks get too scared to lend to each other. And at that point, the next day, credit cards stop working. And that means gas stops coming out of the pump. And you can't, once you run out of cash, you can't go to the grocery store anymore.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Martenson of Peak Prosperity, and I'm here with a very special guest today, Mike Maloney of goldsilver.com. And today, we're going to be talking about what's happening economically in response to the coronavirus. Because as you know, my tracking of the coronavirus has led me to the conclusion that this is probably the biggest pandemic that we faced since the Spanish flu. And it's also the biggest macroeconomic and microeconomic event that we've faced in anybody's lifetime, maybe ever. And so really the backdrop for understanding just how extraordinary this is going to be in terms of its impacts really begins in a great foundational sense of how the actual monetary system works. You have to know that stuff. So this is one of the great pleasures of mine to be working with Mike Maloney on something like this, because of course he is the creator of the Hidden Secrets of Money series, which if you're in quarantine, you have some time on your hands, I want you to start with episode 1 of Hidden Secrets of Money and just go right through all of them, because they will give you really the essential context you need to understand how the money system works. And so this is the plumbing of the money system right now is all gummed up. The Fed just opened up $1.5 trillion of credit lines to banks and 700 billion more of QE and on and on and on. So the question before us is, what do you do and how would you protect yourself given that? And the question I want to explore with you here, Mike, is what does this mean for the money system and how would people protect? I know I'm a big fan of hard assets, which includes a whole variety of things: land, water, food, gold, silver, things like that, tangible, real assets. And so at any rate, good to be talking with you here.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be here. Looking at the way the monetary system is so highly leveraged and how far, I'm writing a book right now, and the level that the bubbles are at, everybody's calling this the everything bubble, and it isn't the everything bubble, it's the almost everything bubble, because there are just a few things that aren't in bubbles. You just bought some farmland. Farmland wasn't really in a bubble. In the big cities, all of the real estate was in bubbles. Gold and silver are definitely not in a bubble, and they've just done a big pullback due to margin call on the on the exchanges. And so they've fallen in price to where they're actually at or below mining costs in most instances. So it's impossible for it to stay there. But when you look at the amount of leverage and the complexity of our monetary system, the outcomes from shutting down the world economy like we're doing right now, where we've just canceled, all cruises are canceled, where airlines are canceling a huge portion of their flights, and it's only going to get worse, where there's all the supply chain interruption that you've been talking about. This thing, I just don't see any outcome that isn't somewhere from depression to a modern dark ages. I mean, this is really, really bad. There's never been anything like this in monetary or economic history. There isn't. The only thing that comes close, as we were talking about just before we started the video, the Spanish flu of 1918, which, by the way, there was a huge deflationary dip right after that. And I think that we're in for the same thing. And if your audience takes a look at Hidden Secrets of Money, they're going to see a very entertaining series of videos. We've got couple of full-time animators that work on this, and it's a big team effort. We try to produce things to a quality of the History Channel or PBS. It's produced to that level and meant to be both entertaining and educational. But I outlined in my book back in 2005, 6, and 7, when I was writing my book, I outlined this roller coaster crash where we were inflating things into a bubble, and there's going to be the threat of deflation with some sort of crash, and that was 2008. And then there would be a big reflation and then a real deflation finally, a big, huge dip. and it's all coming true. And so, going and watching Hidden Secrets of Money, thank you very much for saying that. But if your audience wants to sort of get a glimpse into the future and see what's coming, that's sort of important. And then for me, I'm doing the same thing that you're doing. I am a little bit later than you are, and right now Puerto Rico is closed. There's curfews. You can't be out on the street. There's $5,000 fine or jail time if you're not going shopping for essentials or taking care of elderly, or there's just a few things that you're allowed to be out on the street for. And I was in the process of trying to buy a ranch, and I bought 50 solar panels, and we got the very last ones, and they said there wouldn't be any more for a month or two. And luckily I had ordered them a while back, and we picked them up at the supplier, and that was it. Their warehouse is cleaned out. The Tesla Powerwalls that I had ordered, they're there, but now the government of Puerto Rico has forced everybody to close their businesses. Restaurants can only do takeout. The economy is closed. And the economic consequences from this, for some reason, the stock markets party whenever the Federal Reserve announces that they're going to create currency and buy assets. And that is immoral as can be, to just counterfeit currency and bid assets away from the public. They just buy them up. They're already the largest real estate holder on earth with the mortgage-backed securities that they've collected. And now we also owe them a very large, the Federal Reserve has created currency and bought U.S. Treasury bonds, and we pay the principal and the interest through future taxation on those bonds to pay back. I mean, it's an insane world, but you know about complexity, and you know about anti-fragile, and you know that the more complex you make a system, the more fragile it becomes. And the system is just broken right now. It just broke. What do you think?
That's the part I want to get to, is that systemic part of this. So, you're talking about there in Puerto Rico, what you can feel and see on the street, which is happening all over in cities everywhere. I think 8 states so far, the governors in the United States have said, no bars, no restaurants, no public gatherings, all shut down, right? Well, they can do that, but think about the bar owner or the restaurant owner or the person who's running the gathering facility. Most of those places are the small-sized enterprises, medium-sized enterprises. You know this, Mike. They don't have like 60 days of cash on hand. Like every day that ticks is another day that they are bleeding out, And I haven't heard, maybe you have, but I haven't heard of a single plan that says, and here's how we're going to make you whole, right? So I've already heard lots of cases of people having to very defensively fire their staff right away because their choices are, do I keep paying my staff and then I bleed out, and nobody said how they're going to get paid. So it's like there was no thought in planning around this. And so when the Federal Reserve comes out and says, well, we'll help protect the assets of the rich people, that's all we can do. It really is a little sort of a let them eat cake moment for me. It feels a little tone deaf, Yeah. But the Fed, of course, isn't riding to the rescue. They're just patching the wound that they created, because they shouldn't have done this in 1994. They should have backed off in 98. They shouldn't have done it in the year 2000. They shouldn't have done it again in 2008 when they rode to this rescue. And if it was an emergency, it should have lasted for a year. But here we are 12 years later, and they were still pumping money in to keep assets to protect the portfolios of rich people, mostly. And it was the most ill-conceived, stupid thing. And now when it's breaking, this is what I want to communicate to people, that it's breaking. It was always going to break because it was a mathematical moment of idiocy, right? It was never designed to really work. And it was always looking for a pin. And now that it found not just a pin, but a shotgun, that's what this coronavirus is. There's nothing the Fed can do, and all of its folly is going to be exposed. And I'm very worried personally, because I think that it's where we could have corrected after 2008 and taken some pain. Maybe we lost Citibank and Goldman Sachs, and the world would have been nobody would have missed them in a year. kind of a thing. But now, Mike, what I'm worried about is it's like we've climbed another 20 steps up an extension ladder, and now we're falling from a really, really high area with the leveraged corporate balance sheets, student loans, corporate debt all over the place, everywhere, leveraged sovereignties, countries out there. It just became a debt binge. And now there's no rationale for that debt binge. And when the debt gets taken away like that, all of a sudden, that's when you get that deflation, right?
Yeah, well, if you've got a scared generation of baby boomers that see their 401ks, their portfolios, their IRAs just totally collapse, and they thought that they were going to be able to retire, and then suddenly it's at 10%. I mean, I sent you a chart earlier of the Dow inflation adjusted, and what you see is that if you had purchased at the 1929 peak, which is very similar to the peak that we were at earlier this year. I mean, the peak of the stock market recently. We're going to go through a crash, I believe, that's as bad as 29 or worse, probably worse. It lost 89% from 1929 to 1932. And when you inflation adjust it, what you find out is that it was more than 60 years before it decisively broke back up above the levels that, it was an entire lifetime gone if you were an investor at the peak that didn't get out and protect yourself somehow. And then investing at the bottom is a good thing, but who knows how long it's going to take this economy to recover, because I think that this is just financial Armageddon, that we're going to see the deflation that's going to take place. The Fed is going to fight with currency creation. And as they create the currency, it's the scared baby boomers, when they finally start doing what they call helicopter money, I call it helicopter currency, because people need to understand the difference between currency and money. Currency is what we all use. It's what's in your wallet. It's designed to lose value. And one of the requirements for something to function as money is that it has to be a store of value. That's one of the fundamental requirements. Currency is not. It's designed to lose value. But when they're doing, they've launched QE again. And this is going to lift the stock markets up. They're going to be buying up a lot of assets. And right now they're buying bonds and mortgage-backed securities. But I would not be surprised to see them start buying stocks directly, just like they have in Japan. And in Japan, more than 50% of the ETFs that are of the Nikkei 225 are owned by the Bank of Japan. And so we're going to see that very soon in the United States. So we're going to see a bounce. But there will come a day where the Fed starts financing things like helicopter drops. They might, and in my video, I said they might rebate all of your taxes for last year, or they might rebate them all your taxes that you've ever paid in your entire lifetime. They're just going to create currency and start mailing us all checks like they've already started in Hong Kong and in Australia. And as they do, though, scared baby boomers aren't going to buy a brand new SUV or a big screen TV. They're going to hoard that. They're going to pay down debt, and velocity of currency keeps on slowing down. And so that causes the deflation, even though the Fed is inflating the currency supply. But one of the things I've been warning against is that you're about to see, I believe, multi-trillion-dollar deficits. There aren't going to be, it was 1 trillion basically last year. It's going 1.3, I believe it is, when you take the change in national debt. That's the true deficit or surplus, change in national debt. They have a smoke and mirrors accounting system where they just lie when they tell you what the budget deficit was. But you're going to see this deflation that they will fight. And to do that, they're going to be running deficits of $3, $4, $5 trillion per year. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the currency supply more than double in the next year or so. This might be like a 2-year, this is a very fast crash that we're going through. But there could come a time when the interbank lending freezes up, when the banks get too scared to lend to each other. And at that point, the next day, credit cards stop working. And that means gas stops coming out of the pump. And you can't, once you run out of cash, you can't go to the grocery store anymore. So we've created this fragile system that is breaking right now. And people do need to know what's going to happen and protect themselves. And that's one of the things that I love about your channel, is that it's all about protecting yourself and being resilient.
Well, thanks. Yeah, this is really hard to overstate. First, even if the coronavirus, if we put in the mass containment and we do get manage to level off that curve of new infections, honestly, it's going to be with us until we have that herd immunity or a vaccine comes along. And neither of those are coming along before a year. So that's the minimum time I'm telling people we need to be ready to be in this slog, whatever this thing is that we're in the middle of. It's going to be a year. Because if you lock everybody down and you've stopped it and then you allow everybody back out again, it's just going to come back, right? And so the idea here is we have to find some way of existing now with this new threat in our environment, and that's going to be a whole new learning. But once we get through that, people's behaviors are going to be completely changed. All the consumer behaviors that we thought we knew, I'll take a trip, I'll buy the SUV, all the things that people were doing before we're going to find they're just completely differently changed, and maybe for the better too. Maybe people discover they like spending time with their family and growing a garden instead of spending money at Disneyland, and maybe that's an okay thing on balance, for people's enjoyment in life. So this is going to be with us a long time, though. And so I think people need to be ready to adjust their thinking early and as fast as they can around this new reality, even though, as you and I are saying, and we'll admit straight up, we don't know what's going on here. I mean, this is so fast and there's so many moving pieces and nobody's been through this before. You just got to, I don't know what else to do besides be as defensive as I can be in an environment like this, because I don't even know what the risk parameters are, let alone how to assign values to them.
Right. Well, we do know, you've got to protect your health, and then you're doing a great job on alerting people on what to do and how to try to flatten the curve. That's the big new call to action. But the other thing to do is to protect your finances so that you have some resources and real things right now, like farmland, but precious metals. They've taken this dip. They might dip a little bit further down, but then as they start printing, you're going to see for a while the dollar and precious metals rising, and then you're going to see the dollar crash and precious metals go to the moon. And during those periods of time, if there is still an economy, massive amounts of wealth can be transferred toward you, and that means that you can take care of yourself and your family a lot better. Right now, they have to print all the currencies on the planet into oblivion, because what you're going to see is, in Puerto Rico, with this shutdown, I'm expecting that after this thing is over, 80% of the restaurants at least will be out of business. And it's going to be like that with all small businesses. And then the big businesses, the bailouts that are coming are going to be in the tens of trillions of dollars of currency that they've got to create to bail out every company in the S&P 500 is going to need a bailout. And so as they create that currency, people need to remember that real things are measured by that currency. And the more units that they create, the smaller the fraction of the real things that they're measuring. So the less the purchasing power is good. There will come a day where you see this huge inflation. Once the virus passes, and once they've inflated the currency supply, and once the baby boomers have hoarded enough of it to where they feel like maybe they're going to be okay, then some of them will come out and start spending a little bit of money on this, a little bit of currency, on this or that. And once that starts, velocity picks up, and prices are velocity times the quantity of the currency supply. And you're going to see raging inflation at that point. And that's when gold and silver just shoot for the moon. But the purchasing power of what you can buy with it is what's important.
All right. Well, This is actually a two-part video series, so we're about to wander over for part two. So people who are watching, if you want to follow this to part two, just check out the link right there. You can click on that, and we'll take you over to the part two of this, where I want to talk with you, Mike, about this dip in silver in particular, because I went on a bunch of websites and I was trying to find some to buy. So I want to talk about your perception of that, because I couldn't find any, not at these prices for immediate delivery. So we'll talk about that next, because I really do want to get to the question. Part of the question I know a lot of people have is it too late to buy gold and silver at this point in time?
It isn't too late, but these phantom prices that you're seeing that are the spot price that are dictated by paper contracts that you can make in unlimited quantities called futures, the real stuff is starting to become, instead of gold and silver, I call them unaffordium and unobtainium, because that's where they're going. But the price is just starting to diverge right now, and that's probably going to continue. So thanks.
All right. Well, thanks, and we'll be talking with you soon.
Okay. Thanks.